Hey you, and that's probably about it. The first actual lesson where you have an assignment would be just kind of a review of diatonic harmony. And there's an attachment that says, while this course explores many of the harmonic possibilities available to the 21st century musician, there are enough combinations of diatonic triads and seventh chords to keep a composer, arranger, or improviser occupied for a long time. That's why strictly diatonic chords have been used in the vast majority of music for hundreds of years. And most people still prefer diatonic tunes to pieces that stretch the ears to different keys. Anyway, the musical example provided will be a springboard for the rest of the semester. That, of course, referring to changes we can believe in, but the first variation will be strictly diatonic. Basically just the first half of the tune, changing the chords slightly to use completely diatonic chords, but keeping in mind that diatonic does include major and its relative minor, meaning you can choose from natural minor, harmonic minor, or melodic minor, so you get more variety of chords possible when you're writing in a minor key, because the 5 chord in a minor key can be minor or it can be major. And if you add sevenths to the chords, they become more interesting and more varied. For instance, if you play diatonic chords in harmonic minor, you get 7 different qualities of chords. The 1 chord, the 2 chord, the 3 chord, the 4 chord, the 5 chord, the 6 chord, and the 7 chord. So there's lots of variety available if you go to minor, and you can still consider it diatonic. Most diatonic pop tunes are just in major, and you get nothing but the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 chord, rarely the 7 chord. Instead, they will use the 5 chord, but add a 7th to that dominant chord. For instance, if you're in the key of C, it's a 5 chord with the 7, traditional guitar voicing there. And if they put the 3rd in the bass, it will sound like a 7 chord, but really it's a 5 chord with the 3rd of the chord in the bass. We'll talk about inversions in the next unit. There's going to be 2 assignments actually here with this first, keeping things strictly diatonic with only relative chords, and then another assignment where we use borrowed chords. A bit of an assumption before you take this course that you have studied those sorts of concepts, but there's no assumptions here because there's no school anymore. Okay, so to review, if you're in a major key, you get the C chord as the 1 chord, assuming you're in the key of C, but you've got to be able to do this in every key, of course. 2 chord is minor, 3 chord is minor, 4 chord is major, 5 chord is major, 6 chord is minor, and the 7 chord is diminished, but rarely used in pop music. The relative minor, it's like starting on the 6th chord in major. The 1 chord is A minor, 2 chord is B diminished, the 3 chord is major, the 4 chord is minor, 5 is minor, 6 is major, and 7 is major. And you can refer to those chords as flat 6 and flat 7 and flat 3 in relative minor, depends on what school you went to, basically, whether you call them that or not. The 3 chord in a minor key is assumed to be built on the lowered 3rd degree, but modern analysis often refers to that as a flat 3. I'm using some lowercase numerals to indicate minor and diminished chords, and uppercase for major and augmented chords. There's many different nomenclatures to deal with, and you have to be able to understand them all, including mine, which is challenging. You know, think about all the tunes that are strictly diatonic. Blue Moon, the A section of Blue Moon by Richard Rodgers. Have I Told You Lately I Love You, Like a Rolling Stone by Dylan. Beatles tunes like Let It Be and I Love Her. 1-4-5 tunes that aren't bluesy with a flat 7 and a flat 5, but tunes that just use the 1, 4, and 5 chord, like the beginning of Changes We Can Believe In, but also like Amazing Grace and many other tunes, 50s doo-wop tunes. And oftentimes the melodies are completely diatonic, even if the harmony behind them is a little more interesting. The melodies stay pretty diatonic in a lot of standard tunes. I find music much more interesting if it escapes the ties of a single key, but it is important to at least understand diatonic chords and be able to write in that way, so when you're going outside of the key, you're doing it on purpose. You're stretching your ears on purpose, you're stretching the listener's ears on purpose. Here is the composition. You can see that I just went with what I had already done, the 1 chord, the 4 chord, and the 5 chord. It has a pedal melody over the top, which, it's diatonic, but it doesn't mean the melody is only the root 3rd or 5th of the chord. That's the 3rd of the chord, that's the major 7th of that chord, and it's the 6th of the 5 chord. And then when it goes to A minor, it becomes I'm making the chord a little more interesting by adding a 9th. We'll save that for later. That becomes the 5th, and then the major 7th, and then the root of the E minor. And then without using a pedal to make it modal, I just go E minor to an actual F chord. So I'm playing the 3 chord to the 4 chord. That repeats. And then my 2-5-1, again, the melody. Right, that's exactly the way it was in the original composition. But then instead of going with my chord substitutions, I go to the relative minor. Which could work just fine. That could be the whole tune. You notice the second half of the tune here, or the second 2 lines. 2, 5, 1, 4, 7, which has a dual function as the 7 chord and the 2 chord in the key of the relative minor, A minor, 5 of that minor key, and 1 of that minor key, making it, drawing that 1 chord from natural minor because it has this note in it, whereas the 5 chord had that note in it, the leading tone. So I was drawing that from either harmonic or melodic minor. And then jumping to the 5 chord to bring us back to the top. So your assignment is to write a completely diatonic melody. It can be a variation of something that already exists if you'd like, that's more complicated, and you simplify it, or it can be completely diatonic, but you can still try to be creative by using the relative minor. Good luck!